Well, we've made it. InfoComm 2022 has just closed its doors, and although we're all exhausted, it's been a great show and definitely well worth the effort of attending. The last 3 days seem to have just flown by. Did you feel like that out there?
Yes, it did. It's 23 condensed hours. From the moment they did the ribbon cut into where we are now is just evaporated in the desert heat. Apart from this day 3, it was very, very vibrant throughout both halls and very positively received.
I'd agree completely. Exactly like I said in our day 1 wrap-up, it's just been a really positive show, and I've really not heard anybody have complaints or frustrations or anything like that. I think for many people, ISE kind of set the benchmark for this show. It went well, and therefore there was an expectation that this would produce similar things, but nevertheless seems to have exceeded those expectations.
One of the only negatives, if you call it that, would be, I think we spoke to a number of exhibitors last week who were exhibiting at NAMM and who then had to travel up here in a very condensed time frame. And, you know, the logistics of that movement.
It was hard enough just for us to get across the desert in a car with our film gear. So for them to dismantle a booth and get all the equipment into the trucks and up here and set up here, hats off to them. It's too much, it was too condensed.
And similarly, not everybody did make it out of Anaheim, did there? There were a few casualties along the way, so a few teams short of manpower up at this end.
You're referring to people testing positive for COVID in that sense, yeah. But interestingly, we were not asked for any vaccination ID at NAMM, and yet coming in here to this show, we had to show
different
full,
state law.
And that was a bit unexpected as well, wasn't it? We didn't really realise that until we got here the day before the show. But then despite that, after I'd say 2 days of what's really been the most normal trade show we've been to yet, unfortunately, it seems like there's been a bit of a spike on the final day, but it certainly hasn't gotten in the way of the show in the slightest.
What about on the product launch front, Si?
We've beaten this drum to death by now, but these shows really are less about the product these days than they ever have been. Yes, products are there on the booth, but that's not where the conversation typically starts, and often not where the conversation ends either. You know, if you're not going to be able to ship something for months to up to a year, then that's not really going to be where you're focusing your energies on. A caveat of that is those companies who can get things out quickly, they are making the most of it. And I've heard people say, you know, a customer turned up on my booth who I've never spoken to before. We've had a little conversation, and within half an hour of them leaving, I've got an order in my email inbox straight away, and they're keen. And if they can get the product, they want it, and they want it now.
On that note about the supply chain issues, you attended a press conference, didn't you?
It was very revealing what Aldernate had to say, and they invited a speaker from QSYS to back that up, whereby they explained that they were actually making more chips than ever the last couple of years, but that we've run into a perfect storm of supply and demand, and they cannot make enough. And obviously the chip manufacturers, they've put AV at the bottom of the list. The only way AV is going to counter that is by grouping together, and Aldernate have taken the initiative of grouping those 500 companies that they do orders with to represent a better body of manufacturers.
We are exhausted, but it's definitely been worth it, yeah?
Just run out of time, and I'd love to have got to some more demo rooms. There were only 10 in there this year. There's normally 30 or 40. So there was no excuse for us not really seeing all of them at some point, but we were so busy on the show floor, just catching up with people again after 2 years and seeing them again, and it was great to be back.
So I guess with all of that said then, after 2 weeks, it's finally time for us to go home.
Yes!
That's 4 trade shows we've survived, 4 COVID threats. Have you got a sore throat?
No, a little bit.
Yeah, is it the desert, you think?